The Battle of Wills, Khabib Nurmagomedov vs. Michael Johnson at UFC 205. The journey to UFC 205. The year was 2016, and the UFC was in the midst of an era-defining surge of talent and excitement. UFC 205, slated to take place on November 12, 2016, at Madison Square Garden in New York City, was historic in itself. Not only was it the first ever UFC event in New York since the state legalized mixed martial arts, but the lineup was nothing short of monumental. Conor McGregor was poised to make history, attempting to become the first fighter to hold two UFC titles simultaneously. But beneath the glittering spotlight of McGregor's star, another fight was brewing, one that would shape the future of the lightweight division. The stage was set for Khabib Nurmagomedov, the undefeated warrior from Dagestan, to face Michael Johnson, a gritty, talented fighter known for his lightning-fast hands and knockout power. On one side was a man who was chasing his own version of immortality, and on the other was a fighter who believed he was capable of derailing that dream. Khabib the Eagle takes flight. Khabib Nurmagomedov, an enigma for most, had long been touted as one of the most formidable forces in mixed martial arts. With a professional record that screamed dominance, Khabib had decimated opponents, never tasting defeat. His fighting style was a blend of relentless pressure, powerful wrestling, and a ground game that would make even the most seasoned fighters tremble. As Khabib entered the locker room before UFC 205, his mind was laser-focused. He was more than just a fighter. He was a symbol of his heritage, a product of the rugged mountains of Dagestan. His training had been a lifetime of grappling with the harshest elements, and in this moment, as he laced up his boots, he felt an overwhelming sense of duty. Not just to his family, his homeland, or his fans, but to himself. This fight was another step toward greatness. The pressure was immense. He had a perfect record to protect. But Khabib was no stranger to pressure. Every fight, every battle, every moment in his life had prepared him for this very moment. Michael Johnson, the underdog's resolve. On the other side of the cage stood Michael Johnson, the American fighter with lightning-fast reflexes and a ferocious determination to prove himself. Johnson's reputation in the UFC was built on his speed, his ability to knock out opponents with precision, and his experience in facing some of the toughest fighters in the division. He had faced adversity, but always came back stronger. As Johnson entered the arena, he felt the eyes of the world on him. This fight was his moment, his chance to prove that he was not just another name on Khabib's undefeated record, but a serious threat. He had been training hard, working on his ground game and cardio to avoid the inevitable takedowns that Khabib would bring. His corner had drilled him on footwork, movement, and explosiveness. In his heart, Johnson believed that this was his time. The crowd cheered for him, but deep down, he knew he was fighting the odds. But with every step he took toward the octagon, his conviction grew stronger. He could feel his inner fire. This fight was his to win. The first round, a clash of styles. The cage door clanged shut, and the atmosphere in Madison Square Garden was electric. The roar of the crowd reverberated throughout the building, but inside the cage, all was still. It was a battle of two contrasting styles. Khabib's methodical pressure and wrestling prowess against Michael Johnson's speed and knockout power. As the bell rang, Michael Johnson wasted no time. He moved with grace, his hands light and fast. He looked for openings, trying to stay at range and land clean strikes. Khabib, however, was unfazed. He stalked Johnson like a predator, circling its prey, methodically closing the distance. Johnson threw punches, but Khabib's defensive movement was precise. His eyes locked on Johnson's every move, every feint, every strike. When Johnson made a slight mistake, leaving his leg exposed, Khabib lunged. In the blink of an eye, Khabib was on top of him, dragging him to the ground with a body lock. The ground game was Khabib's world, and once the fight hit the mat, there was no escaping his control. Johnson struggled, trying to wriggle free, but Khabib's grip was like iron. The first round ended with Khabib in complete control, maintaining top pressure and positioning, but Johnson managed to avoid any major damage. The second round began, and Michael Johnson knew he had to avoid the takedown at all costs. He circled and jabbed, trying to keep Khabib at bay. For a moment, it seemed like Johnson might be able to implement his striking game. He landed some clean shots, a few jabs, a couple of right hands, and even a quick left hook that snapped Khabib's head back. But Khabib's determination was unmatched. He absorbed the strikes, knowing that each one was just a step closer to his ultimate goal. His eyes never left Johnson. Khabib shot for another takedown, and this time there was no escape. He transitioned with ease, moving from one position to another, keeping Johnson trapped under his control. Johnson's energy was beginning to drain as Khabib continued to smother him. The frustration began to set in. He knew he had to create space, but Khabib's relentless attack made it nearly impossible. Johnson tried to explode out of the clinch, but Khabib was always one step ahead, blocking his attempts and maintaining top position. The final round submission victory. By the third round, Michael Johnson was visibly exhausted. He had weathered the storm of Khabib's takedowns and ground control, but now his mind was beginning to slip. He was losing focus, and Khabib could sense it. In the third round, Khabib wasted no time. He clinched Johnson again, dragging him to the canvas. But this time, it was different. Khabib was not just controlling Johnson, he was hunting for the finish. The crowd began to roar, sensing that the end was near. Khabib locked up Johnson's arm in a kimura. Johnson tried to resist, but the pressure was unbearable. His arm was trapped in a seemingly inescapable position. There was no room to move, no escape, no hope. The referee hovered, watching closely, and just as the pain reached its peak, Johnson tapped out. The arena erupted in cheers as Khabib's hand was raised in victory. Another win, another step toward immortality. He had done it. He had defeated a dangerous opponent with ease and maintained his undefeated record. Reflections on the fight. After the fight, Khabib remained stoic, as always. His expression did not change, but his eyes were filled with pride. This was not just a win, it was a statement. Khabib had proven once again that no one could match his grappling, his wrestling, or his will. For Michael Johnson, the loss stung, but he knew he had fought a great champion. He respected Khabib's skills and knew he had to go back to the drawing board. Khabib's path toward greatness was becoming clearer. The UFC was beginning to realize that they had a true contender on their hands, one who might one day become the greatest lightweight champion the sport had ever seen. And for Michael Johnson, despite the loss, his career was far from over. He would come back, determined, driven, and with the knowledge that he had tested himself against one of the best,